It is very hard when the closest people betray your trust. These are the people you count on and trust. It's one thing when one close person lets you down, but it's quite another when several are plotting against you at once. Unfortunately, that's exactly what happened to me, and it took me a long time to recover from the betrayal. Family is something to cherish because it is irreplaceable. I do not know where this statement came from, but I consider it indisputably true. Personally, if I had the opportunity, I would not hesitate to part with most of my relatives. Let me clarify a bit. I was the youngest of 3 siblings, and although some believe that the youngest child is often preferred, my parents did not seem to receive such a memo. Despite our family's financial resources, I was constantly receiving the least attractive food. I was assigned the most undesirable household chores, and I was the only recipient of hand-me-down clothes. This may seem like an exaggeration, but a good example is that I didn't try a piece of white meat chicken for dinner until my older sister left for college when I was 14. Back when there were no TV remotes, I was always assigned to switch TV channels in the family. Wherever I was in the house, I was always the one who had to answer the call to change the channel before the start of the desired program. It was almost like a modern version of Cinderella and her stepsisters. But everything changed when Susan Marsden came into my life. One day, my brother Wayne and I watched as a moving truck pulled up to the Johnsons' old house 3 houses away from us. A dark blue Chevrolet station wagon was parked in front of it, from which a man, a woman, a boy, and a blonde, blue-eyed girl got out. My heart was pounding, sweat stood out on my forehead, and my stomach rumbled, a feeling that would become all too familiar in the years to come. Jeffy and the blonde were sitting in a tree. KSSNG. First comes love, then comes marriage, then Jeffy pushes the baby carriage. Wayne sang playfully. At the age of 8, I still didn't fully understand the meaning of the rhyme, but I knew enough to be embarrassed by Wayne's hint that I had fallen in love with the new girl. No boy my age wanted to admit it, even if the girl looked like a blonde-haired, blue-eyed angel. Girls were considered untouchable. Despite the confusion in my head, I couldn't bring myself to admit this to my annoying 10-year-old brother. Wayne was noticeably bigger and heavier than me, which meant that I wouldn't stand a chance in a fight despite my previous unsuccessful attempts. But I was determined not to appear weak in front of the most amazing girl I'd ever met. Eddie and Susan Marsden, aged 12 and 8 respectively, were the only children on our block, so my siblings and I often spent a lot of time with them. Susan and I used to play together a lot because we were the same age. She had a fighting personality and, like me, she was great at throwing baseballs and footballs. Our friendship quickly developed and in a short time, we became best friends. Despite the fact that Susan had made connections with other girls in our rural town, we continued to trust each other until the end of the 8th grade. Although we had never kissed by that time, we often held hands, whether at school or in public places. Teasing male friends about my crush on her, I hid it, secretly enjoying it. In my eyes, Susan was the most beautiful girl in town, and she never stopped making my heart beat faster. But when the school year came to an end, my world seemed to collapse. Josh Archer, the quarterback of our freshman football team, invited Susan to prom, and she gladly agreed. This news made me feel completely overwhelmed like I had never felt in my young life. I thought we were in a relationship, I whispered when she started talking about her date, trying to contain my emotions. Well, you've never officially asked me to be your girlfriend. And besides, he's just a senior and the quarterback of the freshman football team, she said in a happy tone. Yes, of course, I said, moving away from her and the group of giggling girls. As I was entering my house, feeling empty, my brother came up to me. He looked like he was going to give wise advice, as befitted the knowledgeable sophomore he pretended to be. The blonde beat you up pretty good, didn't she? He taunted, using an expletive that made our mother turn her head. Even Wayne's punishment for swearing didn't ease the pain of losing my girlfriend. Mom tried to comfort me by saying it was just one date and didn't mean Susan didn't like me anymore. As if I could believe it. I avoided going to Susan's house and she didn't come to me during the week leading up to the freshman party. I resisted the urge to stay outside to see her when Josh Archer's father came to pick her up. Susan looked great, my brother said when he returned home shortly after Mr. Archer left. For the rest of the school year and the summer, Susan and I kept our distance. We exchanged waves, but neither of us took the first step to start a conversation. I couldn't deny it, I felt miserable. She seemed to have withdrawn into herself and I was still stuck in the past. I hardly talked to other girls and spent most of my time playing baseball during the day and basketball in the evenings. I was pretty good at sports and doing it helped me take my mind off Susan. My brother made it his mission to keep me up to date on her dates, always breaking the news to me when she was seeing someone new. My parents repeatedly noted Susan's absence from our family gatherings. My brother was happy to talk about how he saw her with different guys and my sister Diana often stood up for me, pointing out that my brother himself did not particularly like ladies. "I'm thinking of asking Blondie out on a date," my brother said, noticing her friendliness towards me and readily offering. "If she agreed to go on a date with you, you'd regret it," I warned with annoyance. But focusing on my brother, I did not expect a sudden slap from my father, which fell on my face and head, almost causing me to fall off my chair. "You're lucky you're too far away for me to reach you," my father warned my brother sternly. "But let me be clear, if I catch you joking with Susan, there will be consequences and they won't be mild." "Yes, sir," Wayne grumbled back. The beginning of my first year of high school was amazing. Previously, most of the girls except Susan did not pay attention to me, but now I was the center of attention since every attractive freshman was interested in getting to know me better. Over the summer, I grew up and gained weight. My long dark brown curly hair and big brown eyes gave me a decent look. I found that there were advantages to not being around Susan all the time. At first, I was surprised by the attention the freshman girls gave me, but to be honest, I liked it. I went on dates with several girls, but in the end, I chose as my girlfriend a petite, charming red-haired girl with striking green eyes. Erin Griffin was always full of energy and it was nice to be with her. She earned a place in the freshman support group and her attractive smile and full lips made every kiss with her delightful. Everything seemed to be going well in life. 2 days after the Christmas dance, my mother brought Susan to my room and told me that a guest had come to see me, asking me to keep the door open. Susan and I both blushed. "Jeff, I need to confess something. Last year, I made the mistake of going on a date with another guy while we were together, but I was too scared to tell you," she said. "Since then, I've dated a few other guys and realized that you're the best. I want us to be together again." When Susan came into the room, I was sitting on the bed, immersed in a book. While she was talking, I sat motionless, taking my time to think about her words. After a short pause, I nodded in agreement. "If we move forward," I began firmly, "then we should have no room for doubt. You're my girlfriend, which means you can't have any relationship with another guy, no flirting, no kissing, nothing like that. If I find out about something suspicious, it will be over forever." "I understand," she whispered back. "First of all, I have to end my relationship with Erin. She's an amazing girl and I have strong feelings for her," I confessed. "I saw how close you were at the Christmas dance. I couldn't get rid of the feeling that I should have been there with you and not with some other girl," she replied. Erin took the news better than I expected. I knew that I was to blame for the breakup with her, but Susan and I quickly restored our relationship. When we were walking together, I couldn't resist kissing her and running my hand over her arm. Each time, it made her raise an eyebrow, after which she quickly smiled. She was not only my partner in every sense of the word, but also my best friend. Despite the fact that other guys were trying to get her attention, I knew that she remained loyal to me. We decided to go to the University of Wisconsin-Madison together. In our freshman year, we lived on the same floor in the same dorm. For the next 3 years, we lived together in an off-campus apartment. Although our parents were aware of our living situation and did not quite agree with it, they mostly treated it with understanding. Susan had to assure her parents that she would continue to use contraceptives until graduation. We got married after our sophomore year and our parents organized a beautiful wedding for us. Everything went smoothly until the very end of the celebration when Wayne made the mistake of inappropriately touching my wife while we were dancing to a slow song at our wedding. Even though I was on the other side of the room, I quickly intervened, took his hand away, and hit him on the lips. "Oh," he exclaimed as blood gushed from his gums. "I've already warned you, you idiot, never touch my wife," I shouted as the audience rushed to separate us. After he came to his senses, the rest of the wedding went smoothly. I decided not to focus on the fact that my wife never interfered when my brother touched her from behind. After graduating from university, Susan and I moved back to our hometown. I got a job as an editor for a small magazine group, and Susan worked for a non-profit organization until we decided to start a family. With the arrival of our children, she became a stay-at-home mom supported by my income. I understood that I would not receive a large salary, but I was grateful for the opportunity to provide for my family. My troubled brother became less problematic when he moved to California a year later with his wife, with whom he lived for 2 years. Known for his conversational skills, he excelled at a job in television advertising sales. My mother told me that he had achieved great success living in a luxurious house in a posh neighborhood. I was genuinely happy for him, although I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief knowing that our meetings would be rare. Time, as it often happens, flew by quickly. After 2 years of marriage, Marianne appeared in our lives, becoming the center of my world. 2 years later, Will join our family, adding to it. Even at the age of 38, Susan continued to fascinate me. Her presence still stirred my heart. We shared a passion for fitness, and I couldn't stop admiring her figure, which looked as beautiful as it did during our wedding. Despite having given birth to 2 children, she even seemed prettier, and her breasts became a little fuller, her hips and buttocks had slightly increased in curve. She had turned into a more mature version of herself, and I was grateful that she belonged to me. The news from Mom was heartbreaking. Despite the fact that my brother has never smoked, he was diagnosed with lung cancer, and according to doctors, he has about 2 years left to live. Apparently, he suffered from symptoms for several months, not paying attention to them until he couldn't cope with them on his own anymore. By this point, Wayne had already gone through 2 marriages and a divorce. Both of his ex-wives had difficulty coming to terms with his infidelity, but the positive thing was that they did not have children together. The luxurious house he owned was lost during the divorces, and now he lived alone in a modest 2-room apartment in a not very prosperous area. Despite a successful career, it was obvious that Wayne would need help in the coming days, and Mom had several suggestions on how we could all support him together. The following Sunday, she held a family meeting at our parents' house, hoping that Susan, Diana, Ronnie, and I would be present. Many important decisions were discussed at the meeting. Wayne made it clear that he wanted to stay in his house as long as possible, although it was difficult for those who had to help him since the rest of the family lived far away. After much discussion, it was decided that the 3 women in the family, my mother, sister, and wife, would take turns living with Wayne and helping him. Since my wife was unemployed and our children were old enough to help around the house, Susan took turns staying with Wayne every 4 weeks, which essentially allowed her to spend twice as much time as my sisters and mother. In contrast, my working mother and sister took turns staying with us for 2 weeks at a time. According to the schedule, Diana stayed for 2 weeks, and Susan stayed for 4. My mother would stay with us for 2 weeks, then she would stay with Susan for 4 weeks, after which the cycle would start again. I was surprised by such a detailed schedule and asked my wife about it. "I know you have more leeway since you don't work, but you also have 2 children to take care of at home," I said. "Marianne can now drive a car and help take Will to sports training and other events," she replied. "The 3 of you will have to be more efficient when I'm not at home. I will have to be more organized in the future. We have to support Wayne as a family," she said firmly. I couldn't disagree, even though I knew that the main burden would fall on me. Despite the difficulties, Wayne was family, the children and I would find a way to adjust. We communicated with Wayne via video link from our parents' living room. His gratitude to the women who offered to help brought us all to tears. It was like we were in a heartwarming scene from a movie on the Hallmark Channel. Before Susan left for her first shift in California, the kids and I gathered for a family meeting. We all knew Wayne needed help and the kids promised to assist while Susan was away. In addition, Susan took the time to prepare a few dishes in advance before leaving for Wayne's. "I appreciate everything you do for the family, dear," I expressed my gratitude to Susan. "Don't fall for his manipulations and don't believe his lies," I advised her. She nodded tearfully and walked through the airport gates. While Susan was on her first shift in California, the kids and I kept in touch with her every day. She assured us that Wayne was fine and still able to handle most responsibilities. When she returned, the three of us eagerly went to the airport to meet her. The 2 weeks she spent at home passed quickly and before we knew it, she was back in California. She was cooking for us again and the four of us enjoyed spending time together. When she was around, it seemed that our family had become even more united. During a conversation with Susan during her second shift in California, it seemed to me that something was wrong, although I couldn't figure out what exactly. I didn't want to ask the kids if they felt it too. Susan seemed distracted during our conversation, which led me to believe that Wayne's condition was deteriorating faster than we had anticipated. My wife was very worried about the situation. I convinced her many times that we could make a difference if it got too hard for her. "No, it's okay. Sometimes I just need to remember how lucky we are to have each other," Susan said. "Wayne doesn't have a wife or kids, and he was alone except for us and our mom when we were around. It must be very difficult," she said. We did a great job of managing during Susan's absence. The household was running relatively well, but it was difficult for me to adjust to the fact that my partner and best friend would not be around every day. Susan's absence also meant a lack of intimacy. In the month of her absence, our physical connection had dropped from 3 times a week to 0. I couldn't help but wonder if she felt this absence as much as I did. When I went to pick Susan up from the airport for the second time, I even thought about booking a hotel room so that we could be intimate before heading home. By the time I got to the airport, the desire was so strong that I had difficulty finding a comfortable position in my jeans. Looking forward to meeting my wife after 2 months of separation, I felt incredibly tense in the car. I had to calm down a bit before heading into the airport, fearing that strong feelings might overwhelm me. When she finally appeared at the gate, dressed simply in jeans and a blouse, she seemed as stunning as if she were wearing a ball gown. I couldn't help but notice the fatigue in her demeanor as she approached me, but my excitement overshadowed all my fears. It was only when she sluggishly returned my kiss that I began to suspect something was wrong. Pulling away, I couldn't help but notice the weariness in her eyes. It occurred to me that my brother's health problems were most likely putting a lot of pressure on her, even if she didn't express it openly. Another selfish thought flashed through my mind, but I quickly pushed it aside. The excitement I had felt earlier dissipated when I gave Susan a ride home. Our conversations were minimal and a sense of awkwardness hung between us. When we arrived home, the children immediately surrounded their mother, easing the tension between us. For the next hour, they chatted with her and her tired smile assured them that everything was fine, at least in their eyes. After putting the kids to bed, I went over to Susan and asked how she was feeling. "How is taking care of Wayne? Is it getting too hard for you physically or mentally?" I asked. To my surprise, she looked more energetic than usual. "What's on your mind, Jeff? Do you think I can't handle this?" she asked. "I'm just a little tired from sitting at the airport for hours and the long flight, but I have everything under control. Mom and Diana came to pick up Wayne," she snapped. "Okay, no problem. I understand. You just look tired, that's all I meant," I replied, getting up from my seat and heading to the kitchen, pretending to want a drink. Knowing that I had work the next day, I went to bed at 11 o'clock, trying to convince Susan to join me for reasons I thought were understandable but apparently not clear enough because she told me that she planned to stay up a little longer. My jaw probably dropped to the floor when she said that. After a month of being alone, I found myself craving intimacy, but Susan seemed uninterested. It was clear that something was wrong. The next evening, after getting a good night's sleep, my wife seemed to be in a better mood. She cooked a lovely dinner and seemed more cheerful, but something in her smile was not quite right. We had intimate moments in bed that night, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't fully present. It made me wonder if she really cared. I wasn't the only one who noticed the change in Susan's behavior. On Friday, Marianne suggested a walk after dinner. As we were walking, she asked me, "Dad, what's going on with Mom? It seems that something is wrong. Did you do something?" I understood what Marianne was getting at. I didn't get an answer, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the only problem I had was just being myself. "Uncle Wayne's health seems to be deteriorating rapidly, and I think your mom may be struggling with depression and having difficulty communicating with us," I suggested. My daughter is perceptive, and my words didn't seem to have completely calmed her down. "Do you think she might have developed feelings for Uncle Wayne? Their bond has become even stronger because of his illness." I noticed that she was chatting with him on the phone, and her behavior resembled that of a teenager in love. When he called her, she didn't seem to notice my presence, and her giggles and flirtatious comments were quite disturbing. They are not exactly suitable for a married woman. What should we do in this situation? To be honest, I'm not sure, I admitted. If it's just a temporary infatuation caused by their relationship, I can ignore it. But if it goes much deeper, then I adhere to traditional values and it comes to marriage obligations, Marianne. If she breaks these vows, it could turn into trouble for us. I pray she doesn't do it. Dad, I don't want you to go through a divorce, but I'll understand if she crosses that line, Marianne said. Susan seemed almost glad to be heading back to California the next Sunday. I experienced a combination of relief and irritation. In the 2 weeks that she was at home after a month apart, we were close only 6 times. Our connection, both in and out of the bedroom, was lacking, and it seemed that we were more like friends with privileges. As she headed for the exit, I suggested that she consider hiring professional help for Wayne if it got too hard for Mom or Diana. I reminded her that we need her for the family and she shouldn't leave us for Wayne. In response, she snapped back, "How dare you? I'm working hard to take care of your brother and you're sitting back. You may think I'm selfish, but I'm not stupid. If I get too involved with Wayne, it could damage our marriage," she reasoned. The next evening, I talked to my parents about my concerns. Unfortunately, my mother dismissed my concerns and even called me an egoist when I said that I would not allow my brother to interfere in my marriage, even if he found himself in a difficult situation. I felt uneasy. "Jeff, you can't be serious about this," Mom insisted. "He's your brother and she's your wife and you take care of both of them." "But is it true, Mom?" I asked. "Is my love for them really that deep?" My mother's answer disappointed me, but my father's indifference did not surprise me. He always preferred my brother, even in adulthood. My affection for Susan has not waned since childhood, although I suspected that she had crossed all boundaries in her relationship with my brother. My feelings for her made me give her credit, even if it was a test for my self-esteem. Perhaps someone would consider this self-esteem, but regardless of the label, I was determined to maintain my integrity and self-esteem. My daughter was ready to help me with my plan. She secretly took Susan's keys while she was at home and made a duplicate. I planned to visit my brother's house without warning. I was ready to stay there for a long time if necessary to personally verify the truth of what was happening. I decided to wait 2 weeks after my wife left for California before joining her. Arriving at Wayne's house in a rented car, I got there at 2 in the morning with a small glimmer of hope, although deep down, I knew what I would find. I found them both asleep in Wayne's bed. In a fit of anger, I poured a pan of cold water over their heads, which made them scream in shock, trying to cover their naked bodies. As soon as they saw me standing with the phone, their screams quickly turned into threats. "If you weren't dying, I would have killed you," I shouted to my brother. "And as for you, Susan, if you can understand, we're done. You don't have to come home after your month is over. You can stay here with him until he dies." Susan, tears streaming down her face, tried to cover herself with her hands, but it was pointless. "Really, Susan," I said firmly. "You should have shown more modesty before sleeping with my despicable brother." "I'm so sorry, Jeff," she whimpered. "But he's dying, and I thought I was offering him comfort. He's a family member, so I thought it was acceptable." I chuckled mockingly. "If you wanted to comfort him that way, you should have hired an escort instead of acting like a. I'm not promiscuous. He's a family member." "It was the right thing to do, even your mom agreed." "My mom? Did she think it was a good idea?" I exclaimed, "Yes. She, Diana, and I discussed what to do for Wayne. It was decided that he would not be able to do this for a long time, so we started last month," my wife explained. "So you, Diana, and Mom agreed on this without informing me, your husband, to whom you promised to be faithful many years ago? If the idea was really brilliant, why was I kept in the dark? You were going to tell me about it, weren't you?" Wayne seemed to have chosen the perfect moment to give me his opinion. "Don't worry, Jeff, your wife is amazing and great in bed," my brother chimed in. "The reason no one told you about this is because you're difficult to deal with and we all knew you wouldn't react properly. Unfortunately, we were right. Have you completely devoted yourself to this clever plan?" "That's great," I said. "The one who cheats gets a say, but not the faithful husband who remains in the dark." "Well, you're right. It doesn't suit me to share a wife. You can take her away. I will find another one who will be faithful to me." "No, Jeff, it's not forever. Wayne is dying. Please show compassion," Susan begged. "Are you kidding me, woman?" I replied incredulously. "I showed compassion by letting him take care of himself for a month instead of sleeping with him like some woman." "Stop calling me that. I'm not promiscuous," she countered. "You are having an affair with a man who is not your husband. That's what I call promiscuity." "Even if you disagree with it," I objected. "What difference does it make what he thinks?" Wayne interjected. "I think you're a wonderful daughter-in-law." Susan and Wayne put on their robes and she started changing the wet sheets. "And how long has this been going on?" I asked my wife. I realized that she was trying to soften the blow somehow. Lying had never been her strong suit, at least not in the past. "We started a relationship in the last month of my stay here. He doesn't have much time left, Jeff," she pleaded, tears welling up in her eyes. "Please spare me the innocent pretense. We all know that you are unfaithful and he is a liar." "That's enough," I muttered. Throughout the entire argument, my brother stood aside with a smug expression on his face as if he had the key to life's greatest mystery in his hands. While Susan was fiddling with the sheets and washing machine, he took the opportunity to make a snide remark, believing that I would not answer a man on his deathbed. "You know, buddy, she's really something in bed," he said. "And it wasn't difficult for me to convince her to stay in my room. Do you know why? Because I could. I won, Jeff. I won. You've been insufferable all your life, Wayne. There's nothing surprising in the fact that lying on your deathbed you will become even more unbearable. I wish you nothing but eternal damnation. Enjoy the time you have left if you can, despicable person." I left the house and headed to the airport to catch a flight home. Before 8 in the morning, I was lying on the couch in the family room when my kids came in. I stood up and hugged each of them. "Since you returned so early, it means that everything did not go as planned." Marian expressed her disappointment, exclaiming, I really hoped that my parents would stay together until I graduate from high school. She seemed to believe her brother, and he nodded understandingly. I'm really sorry, Will. I should have talked to you about it, too. I was hoping you wouldn't notice what was going on, and I wouldn't have to explain, I confessed. I've loved her for so long. Is that true, Dad? Aren't you going to apologize to her? She broke my heart, destroyed my trust, and disrespected me. Just apologizing is not enough. I've made that clear. The pain reflected in his eyes showed that he understood what I was talking about. Nowadays, children seem to grow up fast. Given that the divorce rate exceeds 50%, it's likely that he knows many peers whose parents are no longer together. How about pizza for dinner tonight? I don't feel like cooking, I suggested. They both nodded in agreement. While we were eating a large pizza with pepperoni and sausage, I opened up to my children and told them everything. Of course, tears were shed, and I admit that many of them were my own. I also took the opportunity to tell my children about the dishonesty of their mother and uncle. To my surprise, they were just as shocked and angry as I was. I couldn't help but notice that neither my mother nor my sister made a single attempt to apologize or explain the situation. I was sure Susan had already talked to both of them. I expected a quick and decisive reaction from the women in my family. The next day, I wasted no time in setting up an appointment with the lawyer I had contacted before going to California. I had a premonition of what I would find at my brother's house, and this trip was only supposed to confirm it. Although I secretly hoped that I was wrong, deep down, I knew that it was unlikely. It's like trying to make a quick movement in front of a mirror and hoping that it doesn't catch all the details, although it always does. It may seem ridiculous, but that was the reality we all faced.